Today I want to show you how to create collages with a lot of depth and details using some easy stamping techniques. We are going to create this card set I made for the new release by Stampers Anonymous and Tim Holtz, and we are also going to use the brand new Distress Spritz, the new member in the Distress family. Hi, this is Luise Heinzel, and today we are going to start with 3 pieces of mixed media heavy stock as a base for our cards. And I use the Distress Oxide Ink frayed burlap here. I want to create a background first, which is really backgroundish, if that makes sense. I spritz a little bit of water to my oxide ink, and then I dab my paper carefully into this mixture. Here on this first piece, I didn't get what I wanted to get. You will see in a second what I changed and what I want to have because I want some really detailed and tiny dots on my sheets of paper here. In this case, I had way too much water on my oxide, mixed with my oxide ink. So that gave me this blurry-ish background. So I tried this again. I added the oxide ink to my mat and then way less water than before. And I also didn't go through this mixture with my finger. I left it on the mat like it was, meaning spritzing the water to the ink, and then the next step is dabbing the paper into this mixture. That way, as you can see here, you get these really tiny dots which are really close to each other, like a little island of dots or so. The good thing about this technique is if you have something that you don't like I had in the first step, you can just dry it and then add more layers of the oxide ink mixed with the water as much as you want. And you can do that, of course, many times after each other until you have the amount of little dots and details that you want. The whole thing, of course, works with Distress ink as well, but I wanted to have the oxidation here on my card as well because I wanted to have a really faded kind of background look, if that makes sense. As I said, the layering, you can repeat that as often as you want. You could also add additionally different colors or work with additionally different mediums here. I wanted to try the second thing, meaning I have the same color, frayed burlap, but a different medium, and that is the oxide spray. I wanted to stay in the same color scheme, but at the same time, I wanted to try to get more of these tiny dots. And with the oxide spray, from my point of view, that works better, or let's say easier, than with the oxide ink from the ink pad mixed with water. Because as soon as you spritz the spray to the mat, you automatically get these little dots on the mat. And when you then take the paper and dab it into this spray really carefully, then you automatically get this effect to your paper. The mixed media heavy stock is, by the way, really good for this because you already have a color which is not white. Yeah, as you can see, this is not white. I really like this paper because then you already have something that adds to your background. And on the other hand, this paper can handle wet mediums really well. So you can add a ton of water, you can layer and nothing will happen to the paper, and it stays really flat even if you use your heat tool for drying it. I really like this paper. So now let's talk about how to bring this detailed background into a backgroundish background, because this has a lot of contrast in this stage of the project. So I use the Distress Oxide Ink pumice stone here and this little makeup brush to blend the ink from the edges into the middle of my card. That is a good trick as well. If you are a beginner with these mediums, try that out try to start in the corners and then blend the whole thing to the middle, and also start like, moving your tool on the mat and then go to the paper. Don't start moving the tool directly on the paper, because then you get these like little clouds, which you probably don't want to have on your card. You can also add a little bit of water in this stage. I did that here by just spritzing the water to my fingers, and then I've just thrown it to the layer of the pumice stone oxide ink. And of course, all of the layers underneath will be impacted by that as well. But I wanted to have these like water areas, as you can see here. That gives it also more depth, more detail, and more interesting little areas. After I did that, I have taken my pumice stone oxide ink again and did the same step like I've done before. Put a layer of that over the whole card, again, to bring everything even more into the background. Then I have taken my Distress Spritz in the color Weathered Wood and this brush. If you know me and if you know my channel, you know that this is not the brush I usually use to make little splatters. Don't use this kind of brush. My problem was, when I recorded this video, I was still in the situation that I had everything from my craft room in my boxes, because I moved from Austria to Germany and I couldn't find my splatter brush, which I would normally use for something like this. As you can see, it worked, and we can see those beautiful splatters from the spritz, but the splatters have been everywhere on my table, on my hands, and everywhere. So next I want to start stamping. I used the Distress Ink Scorched Timber. I think that is a really nice brown for making backgrounds when you are a grungy person. Of course, you can take any other color or any other brown as well. So I started with this set, which is called Deconstructed. And I must say, this set is the perfect set for me. When I did this relatively intuitively. I, of course, have thought, how do I want this and how do I want to have the arrangement on my card later? I think everyone is doing that before starting such a thing, yeah. But after trying to get the things out from my brain to the paper, this went really intuitively, and I started a little bit, I don't want to say scared, but a little carefully perhaps on the first card to see how this looks, and then on both of the other cards it went like automatically. And I think that's because of the stamps which are in this set, because they match so well. And you can get a really, really interesting and detailed background just by stamping fragments of those stamps to the paper. I also used the smudge technique here. Tim shows that in his videos regularly. I'm really fascinated by this technique. You just stamp, and while the ink is still wet, you go over that with a dry paper towel and just smear it around. That brings the effect that the stamp impression goes to the background even more, and that is exactly what I wanted to have here. Another way of getting more depth and more details is to use the first, second, and third stamp impression, meaning you ink your stamp and then you stamp once or twice, and once would not be enough, Louisa, to use the second and third generation as well. You stamp several times, and with that the impression gets faded, yeah, because you don't ink the stamp every single time. That's what I'm trying to say. So then let's talk about this set here. It's called Tidbits. And when I saw this for the first time, to be honest, I was screaming, because I thought, this is just perfect. I have waited for this set for such a long time. I have always thought, why isn't this available from Stampers Anonymous and Tim Holtz? Because as you can see, and you will probably recognize some of these little tiny pieces there from some ideology snippets. Some of those are also available as, pre-made snippets, which you can buy from ideology. But with this stamp set, we can make our own snippets, and we can also decide on which paper we want to stamp, meaning which background color we want to have, and in which color do we want to stamp. We can make more variations like we would have with the snippets by ideology. I don't say that I don't like them, because that's of course handy. Yeah, if you buy such an ideology snippet pack, then you can just open the package and you take the snippets out and you can use them. In this case, you have to take your scissors or your paper trimmer and cut everything out. That is really, a meditative process. You can think about your further steps while doing this, but it's a little bit time consuming. But I think it's totally worth it, because imagine you can stamp everything at once, as you could see me doing a second ago, and then you can just sit down and cut everything out and put that into your stash, and then you would have these little tiny pieces for your future projects. You can make them in bulk. I think that is a word, like a mass making process. Watch TV and do this, and then you would have enough for probably the rest of your life. I have taken some backdrop papers that I had left over, also, the backdrops from ideology. I had also some older Tim Holtz papers, which I've used to stamp on here. And perhaps you can see that I have used a black ink for stamping, but that the black is not like really intense black. I brayered over the paper while I had that on my inked stamp, and that made that these impressions are really, really irregular. And that is exactly what I wanted to have for my background. So now I take the Distress Ink Scotch Timber again to have the matching color. We have used Scotch Timber before for the stamping on the background. And now I ink a few of these. And the rest, it was approximately half of the amount I have on my desk here. I have inked those, and the other half I have left like they were without any inking around the edges. I did that because I wanted to have more variation for my collage with this step as well. I also destroyed them a little bit here and there. You could see that a second ago, so that they get more interest as well. And then I take this tape here, which is new by ideology as well. Absolutely fantastic. As you can see, I want to use this to bring a little additional pop of color to my background. So I started by gluing one of the wider strips of this tape to each of the cards. And I varied the position here a little bit. You can see the tape is not exactly in the same position on every single card. I did that on purpose because in the next step, I want to try something out. As you perhaps know, I am a junk journaler and I'm not a card maker, even if some of you say that I am a card maker, but I don't feel like that. Often my cards are journaling cards and they go into my junk journals. Making something like this, like a real card, that is something it is something special for me every single time. And I learn many, many things, new things, while making those like real cards. I don't say that a journaling card isn't a real card, yeah, but I think you know what I mean. So I thought, how do those professional card makers manage to get a set of cards which have, for example, in this case, 3 cards, where every single card is a unique piece, but at the same time, the whole set fits perfectly together. I have the biggest respect for all of those people who can do something like that, and I tried to figure out how they do that. So that was the reason why I tried to make my collage here in a really systematic way. I thought I glue the tape down first, and then I choose a strip of these little stamped snippets and glue that down in like nearly exactly the same position on all of the 3 cards. I have chosen those pieces like in a similar length and positioned them nearly exactly in the same position, like, on every single card. And I went on with this system for a relatively long time. In the middle of this process, I couldn't control myself anymore, so it went a little crisscross. But I tried that to try to get the most out of this harmony wise, so that the collages don't look so different in the end. As you can see, I glued those single pieces just on top of each other, and then I added also a little bit more of this tape. In the package, there are 2 different sizes of the tape available. There's this wider one and the more narrow one, and I think that is a really, really nice thing for also getting more depth to something, like in this case, this collage, because with the different sizes, you also have the feeling of more depth. If you want to have even more depth, and if you want to go more into this, like mixed media direction, you could also try to take, for example, a crayon or a watercolor pencil and go around the single pieces of your collage and then blend that, for example, with your finger in the case of a crayon, or with some water if you used the watercolor pencil. I think that could look also really, really interesting. I thought about doing that for, let's say, half or 1 second. Because I thought perhaps it could be interesting to let these little pieces of the collages look like bricks or something, where interesting things are written on. But then I thought I have used the oxide ink for making the background, and I was really afraid of smearing everything around, because when you use water for blending something, and you have oxide ink and oxide spray and the distress ink also in the background, then you would reactivate that with the water, and that it can happen that you get these like weird craters, these like outlines around the area of the shadow. And that is the reason why I haven't done that. If you want to avoid that, you could take some of this, how is that called, microglaze, and put that over the background, so then it would be water resistant, and then you could do something like making shadows or so. So next I want to take these flowers here, and I want to color them in a way that Tim suggested, how you could use the new distress spritz as well. So there are many, many techniques that you could do with this new medium, and I wanted to try the thing with the watercolor pencil. And as you can see, I'm trying this out here. This was the first time I have ever done this, and I was so surprised how wonderfully this works. I mean, surprise is perhaps the wrong word, because when Tim says this is cool and you can do that, then of course it works, yeah? So don't get me wrong. But I was surprised, because normally when I try to color a stamp impression, it looks a little bit like a child in the kindergarten has made it. And this, I think, if I remember that right, was the first stamp impression I have colored and I was satisfied with. Normally, I practice a little bit, normally without you and without the camera. And then I think, how the heck, why and how? Do you know what I mean? When I see other people doing this, then it looks so easy, and it looks like so beautiful in the end, that I always think I must be able to practice that and then be satisfied with my result. Yeah, I mean, when you do something like this, of course, it's personal preference if you like your flower or whatever you color or not. And the main thing is that you have to like it. What other people think about that is not relevant in this case. But I was so surprised that I started, and from the first brush stroke, I was like, what the heck, this works, and I seem to like it. And especially with the spritz, I was really surprised about myself and about my own taste, because, you know, the spritz is a shimmery medium, yeah, and it has this really, really cool shimmer. But if you know me, you know that I normally don't use so much of these shimmery products in my projects. But in combination with the watercolor pencil, by the way, this was Scotch Timber. I don't know if I have mentioned that before. This was the right amount of grunge and the right amount of shimmer for my taste. Do you know what I mean? And I'm really surprised about the effect that you can get by using these mediums in combination with each other, because remember what we have done. We have taken the watercolor pencil and dipped it into the spritz. That makes that the liquid in the spritz activates the pigment in the watercolor pencil, and then you can just color your stamp impression. I mean, what the heck? That is really great. You don't even need water. That is good, because the liquid in the spritz is doing the job. And I think that is not only really easy, but it also gives a really beautiful effect. And with mixing those mediums, you can get a ton of different color combinations, of course, as well. Imagine you would take the weathered wood watercolor pencil or another grayish bluish color, and then use the weathered wood spritz. You would get a totally different effect. And that with combining just two different mediums, I find that really, really fascinating. So what you can see me doing here is I try to get some lighter areas to my flower on the one hand, to bring more depth into this whole thing and to get more details on the flower. And on the other hand, I did that because of the look of the flower. In this stage, the flower was still not mine. I wanted to have my flower on this card. I wanted to turn the stamp impression into my own piece of art. And also because of the techniques I have used here, I have used this white Posca pen to get more details back to the stamp impression, because I have stamped with black ink and then I have used the watercolor pencil and the spritz. And that makes that the black of the stamp impression of the flower gets a little faded, because the pigment of the watercolor pencil, of course, it goes on top of the black ink, and then the black is not black anymore. I know there are a ton of tricks, like, for example, embossing the stamp impression and then color it so that the embossing powder can't hold the wet medium you are adding, and then you can just wipe it off later. I thought about that first, but if I would have done that, the black would probably be too black, because I wanted to have this in a really monochromatic way, yeah, and I didn't want to have too much extreme black on my card. That's why I did it like this and tried to bring back the details of the flower in my own way with the white pen. I hope that makes sense. And that is, of course, also a cool way to customize your stamp impressions. Yeah, so you don't always have to use the stamp impression like it is. Yeah, because some people say, oh, I love flowers, but then I have 2 or 3 or 4 sets of flower stamps, and then I use them all over my whole projects, and then they get boring with the time. I can't understand that, because you can do so many unique things with stamp impressions. just take some other mediums, some pens or pencils, or in this case, this white Posca pen, and customize these stamp impressions. Then they won't look the same every single time, but you have a unique thing every single time. So let's add more, no, not more, but other colors to the other flowers. I have chosen the worn lipstick spritz and also peeled paint. I thought that these three colors go really well together with the scorched timber watercolor pencil. Of course, you could mix every color of the spritz with the scorched timber, and that would look great. But I also thought about the color of the tape I already have on my card in the background. And I thought that these colors fit the best to this yellowish orangey color of the tape. First I thought Villainous Potion would be a really nice color for that as well. But then I thought about the set of the cards, and when they are laying next to each other, you know, I'm a little bit some kind of a freak. And I thought that like some kind of a blue, some kind of a red, and some kind of a green would be better than having purple in this set. Do you know what I mean? So to give the flowers even more dimension, I have put some foam tape to them and then glued them to the background. And now I want to take the floristry set to stamp some quotes. Here they already are. Video magic. I ink them up with some scorched timber ink as well to give them, you know, like this little aged frame and make them match to the background a little better. I have glued them down with foam tape as well to have them raised a little bit, the same like with the flowers, so that we have more dimension here as well. And then I came to the idea to staple a little bit my card. I've used the tiny attacher here because it makes the tiniest staples, you know, really, really cool. And I think that is an interesting addition because we have the plastic of the tape and this glossiness of the tape. Then we have the paper where we stamped the little snippets, and now we have this metal of the staples. And I think that is really, really nice. And it gives, you know, when you hold the card against the light, an additional kind of shimmer somehow, because the metal, you know, metal and light, then you see this shimmer of the metal. Do you know what I mean? And that, in my eyes, matches really well with the spritz and also those little splatters we made in the beginning with the weatherwood spritz on the background. So for backing the card, I have taken some Ideology craft stock, as you can see, that is available in different colors. And here I'm trying to decide which color I want to have. I was surprised that I have decided for the darker green for the peeled paint card. You have just seen the other green that is like, in my eyes, that is not correct. For my taste, I've learned that in my eyes is not such good English. Thank you to the person who has told me that. The other green would have fit better to peeled paint, in my opinion, but for the card and for the frame, it was like too intense somehow. So that's why I decided for the darker green. And yeah, so then I'm just struggling a little bit because here it looks like I have taken the other one. Sorry, I'm making the voiceover over my video, but I'm pretty sure that I used the darker green. I'm so sorry. Yes, I think it is 99% sure it is the darker green. So, but that doesn't matter. Please take what you like the best, yeah? So here I'm making some splatters with some black acrylic paint mixed with some water. Again, I have not my favorite splatter brush here in my hands. That's because my splatter brush is in one of my boxes because of my move. But as you can see, this works as well. So if you don't have like the perfect brush, just take what you have and do that carefully. So then you can, you know, avoid some big blobs on your cards. Because that would be a disaster, because now our cards are finished and of course we don't want to have a fail in the very end. So as you can see, I've also sewn around my cards with my sewing machine. I think that gives it a nice addition. And here you can also see the shimmer of the spritz in detail. I'm so in love with this product. You can't believe it. It's just so beautiful. So I hope you like this, and perhaps you could get some inspiration. See you the next time. Have a very great day. Bye bye.